not new neuronins back, slicing through the noise with a culture attack. Pop culture films in the world we see, deleted scenes where the truth runs free. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen out there in YouTube land. I am Deleted Scenes, human being, American, and YouTube Ronin. And I'd like to welcome you to tonight's episode of Unscripted. I want to start off by saying hello to everyone currently following along on X. I can't see you, but I know that you're there. I want to say hello to a few people who have joined us here in the live chat. Faithful Blue Wrench, channel member of the Bird Woman of YouTube. Watch out for her channel, Fluff Chick Productions. It's Connie Cleary. Friend of the channel, D. Penzak. I'm an adult. I understand the circle of life. You're born, you live, you die. But you are raised with a family. You make friends along the way. But sometimes people come along who aren't actually family, aren't really friends. You might get lucky and meet them, but most of the time you don't. But they still feel like family, they still feel like friends. And when they pass, it feels like you are losing family. You are losing a friend. Because these are people who have become a part of your life. And in some ways, you don't even realize it. You know, in a lot of cases, they were always there. You know, from your childhood, and sometimes even before that. Maybe your parents were fans. So there are people who come along and they feel like family and they feel like friends. And one of the ways that they get to that point is the fact that they don't disrespect people, they don't disrespect their fans. You see how they treat the people in their own lives. And that is how you become a legend. You continue to put out good work for decades, which helps you grow a fan base. You try to bring some quality to everything that you do, and you show respect to the people around you and to the people who got you where you were. And we lost a number of people this week, in recent weeks, who did that, who very much fit that bill. These people who were always there ever since we were little kids. You remember the Transformers. You remember 9 to 5. You remember, you might not have been allowed to watch the Rocky Horror Picture Show, but you know what it was. So, when you're a kid, you have to say, oh, Clue. Yeah, you know? But you know who Frankenfurter is. You watch Big Trouble in Little China and go, oh, that guy's kind of familiar. I've seen that guy. And maybe you might not have known his name, but you remember him. You know who he is. Hey, he's that guy who was in that thing that one time. And he was in that other thing, the other time. Or you can watch a sitcom and, maybe one of your parents will say, oh, before she was an actress, she was a singer. Remember that Johnny Angel song? That was her. And go, oh, I didn't know that. Now you do. So after a while, they begin to feel like family, like friends. They begin to feel like people that you would be comfortable around. And you get that way because you realize that that's exactly how, in their actual lives, they treated people. They treated people with respect. You don't get a lot of that these days. When you hear someone come on to YouTube, and say, that we are losing the greats and no one there to replace, and that's wrong. Because those people were one of a kind. And when they pass, you feel something. You don't pass it off as just a celebrity died, or you just pass it off as, okay, it's very sad that this person died, but I didn't know them. And there's this disconnect. And sometimes there isn't one. You feel like you've come to know these people and you've come to care about them like they were your own. They were always there. You know, I was a kid, just like a little kid watching the Transformers. I used to, you know, imitate Optimus Prime. Autobots unite. I could never do the voice the way that Peter Cullen did. But damn if I didn't try. you know, um, 40 years, maybe I'll get it right. you know, um, and well, even longer than that, because of course, it was a series before it was a film. The movie's 40 years old. The show's older. You know, I didn't know, and this was a fact that got past me, was that he actually created the Predator language, for the films. He's not credited anywhere. He didn't do the voice in the film, but he created it, which was something that I did not know. And I knew him even before transporter Transformers, um, because he was also the voice of Eeyore. And of course, I had known who Eeyore was. I knew the Winnie the Pooh stories. Um, I remember the movie. I remember the Day for Eeyore. Where they decided that they're going to raise his spirits by throwing this birthday party for him, basically. So he was Eeyore as well. So I didn't make the connection at the time, obviously, but again, these little signposts, Eeyore when I was a little kid. Um, Optimus Prime when I'm starting to get into my teens. So here, Peter Cullen becomes sort of a part of my life. These signposts in history for myself that I can go back and think about, and you know, Tim Curry, the same way. Yeah. Like I said, I was aware of what I was aware of the Rocky Horror Picture Show. I did not get to see it until years later, because obviously it's not something my parents are going to let me watch, because I would be asking too many questions afterwards. Um, but I was well aware of what it is, and I knew who Tim Curry was. But I had actually first heard of him through another movie that I was not allowed at the time to watch. Was this movie called Times Square, which was like late 70s, early 80s, and he plays this radio DJ. So, not in like crazy makeup, not being some over the top character, just looking like a regular dude. So that was like a good jumping off point where I had actually first seen him in something was Annie. Because I was taken to see Annie when I was a little kid. And, I liked the movie. I thought it was a little long, but, I got it. Who's this kind of weird guy who's, kind of acting like a rooster? And they're actually called a rooster. And I'm like, okay. Little weird, but I'll go with it. But Frankenfurter in comparison. Can we have Rooster back, please? So of course there was Clue and all the other films that he had been on, and he was a musician as well, obviously, so, and a singer, so obviously, so very multifaceted guy. And then I had heard that he had in 2012 he had the stroke, and he did something that I thought was really interesting. Was he apologized to his fans for having a stroke? Who does that? And we're like, dude, don't apologize to us. We're worried about you. Don't worry that you missed a convention. No, see to yourself. But to think that man cared so much for his fans that even though we understood, okay, you've fallen ill, you nearly died, the fact that he did that and obviously cared so much for his fans the way he did, that ingratiates someone to us, and you become not just another celebrity, you become someone who again feels like you're a family. You feel like you're a friend, you're a friendly face. And hello to Nate. Geek Flag with Nate Knows, channel member. Optimus Prime's voice is actually Peter Cullen's older brother, a U.S. Marine. They explained him to character. The ultimate movie says it sounds like my brother. Cool. Now, James Liu was a name that you might not necessarily know. And the fact that he was one of those guys where you might not have known his name, but you'd certainly see him. He was always one of those, hey, that guy who was in that thing. He's one of those guys. And, always the supporting character. Maybe he's going to be the bad guy who gets killed in something. But I kind of first noticed him, even though he was probably in 100 things before that. I first noticed him in Big Trouble in Little China. And he was just one of those guys that you always could follow through, all of these action movies. He was in the best of the best films, and, he's in Lethal Weapon 4, where he's one of the main bad guys in that. But again, someone who maybe you didn't know his name, but you recognized his face, and you could follow him through all of these films. And, and the first time you see him, he's probably, oh, he's going to get killed, isn't he? Oh, this poor guy. But he was one of those people, one of those actors who was always dependable, and he was a stuntman too, so he took all the falls. He did all the fights, he took all the falls. He crashed all the cars, he crashed through all the he crashed. If he crashes through a window, he's going to crash through a window for real. But he was always one of those guys where you could always go, I don't know about the rest of the movie, but I tell you, these next few minutes, they're going to be pretty damn interesting. So again, he got lost in the shuffle of recent events, but I was very sad to hear that he passed. And he wasn't very old either. He was 73. I don't consider that old. I'm only 20 years away from that myself. So yeah, he will be another one who will be missed. Another one who kind of got lost was Shelley Fabre. And I knew her from Coach. I never made the connection that she was a singer. I just thought she was like this TV actress, right? And I think she had done a movie with Elvis, and I don't know if I knew that at the time, but the fact that she had this whole other career decades before as a singer, and I realized, oh wait, that was her. Like Johnny Angel and some of these other songs. And I didn't have a clue. I never made the connection until, like I said, like my mom told me, like before she was an actress, she was a singer, and she did this movie with Elvis and all this, and and I was like, oh, okay, well, that's really cool. But again, someone that you never heard a single solitary bad thing about her, and you never heard her say anything against anybody either. And this is what I am talking about. These are people who reach the status that they have reached, not only because they did the work and they grew the fan base, but they respected their fan base and never wavered from that. And hello to Curtis Selby, the Tired Midnight Blogger. Curtis is going to be joining me later on tonight for reserved seats as my guest in about 95 minutes or so. Nate says Tim Curry was on an episode of Psych. When the creator of the show said he approached him about doing the show, he said he introduced himself, says he was a showrunner for Psych. Tim Curry said yes. Fourier asked him to be on the show because he was such a big fan. Yeah. And he did that. He did that with Criminal Minds as well. And he was when he did like a story arc on Criminal Minds. He was a fan of the show, and he said yes. Now, there are people who get upset whenever somebody brings up Dolly Parton and you just bring on, and you mentioned like 9 to 5, like that was the only thing she ever did. But I mean, no, obviously not. And I get the argument, but yes, the first thing I always think of is 9 to 5, because there was this song and it was always playing on the radio, and there was the movie, and they got me to sit through a movie with Jane Fonda in it. That's not easy to do. You better have somebody else in that movie worth watching. um, and you had Lily Tomlin, who I was aware of, but didn't really have any opinion on either way, honestly. And then you had, Dabney Coleman was funny, playing this complete and utter bastard. Yeah, whose behavior would probably just get him canceled today. But you have Dolly Parton, somebody who sounded like all of the people that I knew, and just just it kind of came off as somebody who was a really decent person in a situation where people are not being decent. But of course, she was so much more than that, and she had this career that went back even before that film. And then you come to realize the poverty that she grew up in. And the fact that, she didn't let that get her down. She was someone who had dreams and fulfilled those dreams and went on. Once she made her own personal fortune, to go back and to give back to those who are needy. She gave away like 70% of her own personal fortune went off to various charities. And there are people who the celebrities that we get today, they rail against millionaires and billionaires, even though they are millionaires themselves. Why aren't you giving back to the people? But you notice that they never do. And they shy away from the public. And they hide in mansions, and they hide behind walls and gates. The walls and gates they say we can't have, behind the armed security that they say we can't have. But Dolly Parton was different. She was the antithesis of that. Again, someone who never said a bad word against anyone. No matter how many times they tried to bait her into saying something against one person or another, and she never took the bait. And that says something. Again, make it, not just pretending to be a good person, actually being a good person. Respecting the people around you, respecting your fan base. And when someone like that passes, you lose something. You lose that goodness. You feel that the world is a lesser place. You have people who make the world a better place. When they pass, you feel like a little bit of that light is gone. But then you also have to remember that they are always going to be here because they have left behind the legacy. I Will Always Love You is going to still be there. Um, Rocky Horror Picture Show is always going to be there. Optimus Prime is always going to be there. Johnny Angel, Big Trouble in Little China, they're all going to be there. Why? Because that's our job. We're here. We're left behind. We're sad. But we still have these people in our mind, in our heart. And hello to Outlaw Bill, Toxic Gunslinger. Good to see you, sir. We will remember these people when they pass. They will live on with us because we keep the discs, the CDs. We will continue to watch the movies, listen to the music. And that, my friends, is how you achieve immortality. If one person remembers you for one good thing that you did, then you did your job. You lived your life. We remember because they entertained us. They were always there and they never let us down, sick or well. And hello to Big Al Presents, creator of the 10-Word Review, host of Films with Friends. I know that if any one of the people that I've brought up in this show, icons, as Al says here, and I would certainly agree, I think they would all tell us to not be sad. I think they would tell us to remember the good times. So while, yes, we are sad and we can mourn, we also still have these people. We have them all. They're still there. And I'll close out with what Nate has said here in the chat. A person only truly dies when the last person to speak their name is gone from the earth. I think that's a good place to close out. I want to thank everybody for joining me this evening. Stay tuned for Geeky Geezers at the top of the hour. Join me for reserved seats at 11 p.m. Curtis Selby will be my guest of that program. Stay to the end and you will be redirected back to Troy Pacelli's channel for the next episode of Doctor Who. From HQ and all points north, south, east, west, and beyond. Good night. Take care. Stay strong. Be safe and healthy, because this is how we win.
It's even odd when Ronan's back, slicing through the noise with a culture attack. Pop culture, films, and the world we see. Deleted scenes, where the truth runs free. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. Take care, stay strong, we're breaking the mold. Be safe, stay healthy, let the story unfold. From watch parties, reviews to the news we spin. Deleted scenes, yeah, this is how we win. You're using Brother, let's roll.